Okay, so now that we're a little bit more comfortable with our robot and getting the motors and sensors set up here, hopefully yours are still there if you saved your PLTW template correctly. Yesterday we got to mess around with manually turning on motors and manually pressing and manipulating sensors and seeing how that changed things in Robot C. But now we want to go away from manually doing things. We want to start programming. We want to start getting this set up so that our robot does things on its own. And that's going to involve this area over here, this text functions. And I can tell you right now, the only one of these that we're going to use in the beginning is natural language. Now, for some of you, natural language isn't there right now. If that's the case, you have to go to robot platform type, like I said we do every time. You got to make sure this and this are both selected. If they're not, you will not see natural language. You won't have your codes. So if you ever get an error or you don't see natural language, check that first. Before I go any further, I do want to say you got to have a pencil and paper out, that same one from the other day that we were writing with, just to jot down things as we go along, things that are going to be helpful for the future here. So we've got a program open. We're going to talk about codes in a second, but before we do, we're going to talk about this stuff we see down here. Okay. Now don't worry about this green stuff. If it's annoying, you can actually get rid of it. It doesn't affect the program at all. The green stuff doesn't, but everything else does. If I delete even the smallest little piece like this, my program, if I tried to compile it, is going to show up with errors. Okay, so instead, we want to just make sure that everything that is colored stays the same because it will mess things up. First note you really want to take is task main is this thing right here. Okay, this is where you put your program. Okay, between these two curly braces is where your program will be run. Robot C looks for task main, then it looks for the first curly brace. It'll run everything inside of it, and then it'll stop once it reaches this curly brace right here. And if you don't know how codes work, what it does is when a code's run, it'll start at the first line, so it would be right here at 26. It moves through and runs these codes, whatever they are, whether it's turn on light, start mode, or whatever, and it runs through lightning fast as it possibly can to get to the bottom. Okay, so that's how coding works. So make sure you have written down what task main is. It's the area where you put your code. You need to have down that you can't delete anything that has a color because it will mess up your code. And most importantly, probably the number one thing that makes people have errors like this is make sure you have both your curly braces for your task main. If you don't, you're going to have an error. Okay, so if you have all of that, you're going to be good to go. Let's keep moving on. Okay, uh-oh. I'm still getting errors. Error found. Oh, sorry about that. There we go. Better now. So, we're going to talk about a couple things here. Number one, what sorts of codes we're going to be dealing with. Like I said, we're going to only use natural language here. We're going to ignore setup and robot movement. We're only going to talk about movement, wait, until, and special. So let's fly through this. Don't have to write anything down here. What's in each category though? Movement's going to have your commands that allow you to control motors. We don't have these things called servos, so you've got a start motor and a stop motor in here, and that's it. Special is commands that control the more unique hardware. We don't have flashlights, so we only have turn LED off and on in here. We've got until. And this is commands that allow you to create behaviors where the robot acts until a certain event happens. For example, until a button is pressed or a potentiometer reaches a certain value. And we have wait, which is commands that wait for an elapsed amount of time in seconds or milliseconds. We're going to only use the regular wait. Forget about the wait in milliseconds. Okay, so that's what we got. And if you look, you hit the little plus button next to each one, you'll see those actually pop up. And you can just drag and drop those in as lines of code. Pretty neat, and you can delete them out just like that too. You can also type them in if you want. Choice is completely up to you. I think it's easier to drag and drop. That's me. Now, the big picture here is how do we get our robot to do what we want? There's a couple things we need to think about. Number one, what is it that we want our robot to do? And number two, what sequence of codes do we have to put in to make it do it? Okay, so we're going to start off with an example, and then I'm going to teach you about something called pseudocode. For example, I want my robot to move forward at full speed for 5 seconds, then stop. Then I want my robot to move in reverse at half speed for 3 seconds and stop. I figured out my task, but how do I write it out? I'm going to use something called pseudocode, and we're going to type that up in just a minute. Get your pencils ready. Pseudocode, okay, is shorthand notation for programming, which uses a couple things. Number one, it's informal programming structures, so it's not lines of code. It's things like if bump switch is pressed, okay, and it's verbal descriptions of code like move forward, comma, stop, okay. So it's really shorthand for coding. And the emphasis is placed on expressing the behavior or outcome of each portion of code rather than the correct syntax or sentence structure. So you're more so focused on what behavior do you want to happen in what order rather than having correct English sentences. Okay? It's got to be reasonable enough that you can actually tell what you're saying, but other than that, you're just basically going to take that task that we had there and we're going to break it down into little small behaviors. Okay? So let's go back here and talk about this. What's the first behavior that we have? Let's read this task again. I want my robot to move forward at full speed. Okay? So what would we have to do to have that happen? Well, we've got to start or turn motor on at full speed. Okay? That's easy enough. Okay? Next thing, for 5 seconds. Okay? You can either say for 5 seconds or wait for 5 seconds. Okay? And then we want it to stop. Okay? Well, we're going to have to turn the motor off. Okay? Simple enough. So we want it to move forward for 5 seconds and then stop. So we want to turn the motor on at full speed, wait for 5 seconds, turn the motor off. So we're just breaking down the behaviors. Okay? Then I want my robot to move in reverse at half speed. Okay? Turn motor on in reverse at half speed. Okay? For 3 seconds. Wait for 3 seconds. And then stop. Turn motor off. Okay? And what this has done for us is it's broken up your task into individual lines of code. Okay? We can now translate from our pseudocode to regular code. Okay? So it's a little easier to see what's going on. I'll show you exactly what I mean here. I'm going to push this off to the side. Make this a little smaller. See if I can get a good looking window here. There we go. This will work. Perfect. Okay? So the first thing my pseudocode says is I need to turn the motor on at full speed. Well, you can probably guess that's going to be in our movement category. And if you have a set of eyes up in that head, you've probably already spotted the start motor command. Turn motor on, start motor, same thing. You're translating, like I said. So we're going to pull that in as our first line of code. Okay? Now there's a couple things here. It says motor port. That's asking what motor do you want to start. We've got right motor and left motor. Okay? We've got to type one of these two names in exactly how we've got it written up here. Doesn't matter which one for now. I'm going to type in right motor. Okay? You'll notice it turns red because it recognizes that that's one of our motor. And then I said at full speed. Well, with debugger, we realized that full speed is, or the max number is, 127. Okay, so you type in 127. Easy enough. That first line is done. Okay, hold on a second. There. Now, we've got to wait for 5 seconds. Well, we've got a whole category called wait. So hopefully we can pick this one out too. And I said we're only going to use this one. So we pull this one in underneath. We just got to tell it how long we want to wait for. We type in 5, and hey, your second line is done. Okay? Then we want to turn the motor off. Let's go back to movement. Stop motor. Hey, that's an easy translation. Once again, it wants to know the motor port. What name? Okay? Right motor. This one's done too. Turn motor on in reverse at half speed. So we've got to start the motor up again. Okay? We've got to tell it which one. And you'll notice it actually pops up. I just typed in RIGH. You can actually double click in the little menu down there. That's fine. Okay? And so reverse at half speed, that'd be -63. Okay? We're going to strike that out. Wait for 3 seconds. Okay, we're waiting. Bring in a wait. 3. Got that one done. And last but not least, turn that motor off. Let's go back to movement. Stop motor. Okay. And we type in right motor. Okay. So that's a lot of stuff to take a look at. However, let's take a peek at what we just accomplished. Okay. We looked and learned what codes we have out there. We learned how to take a task that we want a robot to do and turn it into small, concise behaviors. Then we learned how to take those behaviors and translate into code. We also learned how to pull those codes in. This is a perfect code right here. I want you to go ahead and try this one in your own Robot C. You can just pause the screen and go ahead and pull these in. But pull it in, type everything out exactly the same as me, and when you're done, go ahead and try to compile and download it to your robot. Make sure you've got your orange cord plugged in, your batteries plugged in, and your Cortex is turned on, and you should see your right motor turn on full speed for 5 seconds, and then your right motor go in reverse for 3 seconds. Okay? So that's your first code. You've completed it. Go ahead, give it a shot. Let me know if there's any errors, questions, anything like that. Good luck.